Welcome to Northwest Newsweek, and thanks for being with us. Municipalities across the region are beginning to put together their final municipal budgets for the current term of council. After months of public input, Marathon councilors and administrators sat down Monday to review the necessities for the municipality. Adam Riley has more.
A very tight, clean budget.
That's the plan for Marathon this year as councillors and administration gathered Monday to get a first look at the 2018 municipal budget. Mayor Rick Dumas says so far the overall budget sits at just under $7 million.
This year is probably one of our lower budgets overall. We are just under about $4.9 million in overall operating budget and about $1.9 million in capital. So a very clean, crisp budget this year in Marathon.
Dumas says they are looking to make reductions of $137,000, which will have to come from the capital budget. Items of note include an amalgamation of resources by making CAO Daryl Skwarczynski also serve as economic development manager, repairs to 3 of the greens at the community golf course, and an ask of roughly $30,000 from the Historical Society to assist in its bid to bring the Peninsula Tug back to Marathon. Skwarczynski says council has agreed to fund that initiative, but only at 50% of the overall request.
We receive, a large number of requests on an annual basis to fund different projects in the community, and they're all very worthwhile in receiving funding, but there's a limited amount of funding to fund all these projects. So, I can tell you from experience, our current council does its best to fund them all at some level, and then look at other in-kind support services the municipality can provide to help move those projects forward as well.
Skwarczynski says from an administrative perspective, they had 3 things in mind.
The administration didn't recommend or propose any service reductions in the community whatsoever. We tried to keep, the budget increases to inflationary pressures only. And the third thing that administration wanted to include in the budget is, some forward-thinking projects, that shows that, we do envision the future. We do have projects on the books that we see that will ultimately, hopefully create some economic sustainability for us.
One of those projects is the proposed new recreation center to replace the aging arena, pool, and movie theater on Peninsula Road. Monday's budget meeting was just a review of the first draft. Skwarczynski says an updated second draft will be made available in early March, and if council's happy with its contents, that budget will be voted on in late April. Adam Riley, TBT News.
A 2-year undercover investigation into the activities of a pair of tourists in the Fort Frances area has led to a series of fines totaling $13,000. The joint investigation performed by the MNRF and the Michigan Department of Natural Resources stems from several complaints and tips into unlawful hunting activity, the sale of moose meat and fish, failure to wear orange hunter gear, possession of a loaded firearm in a powerboat, and failure to comply with the MNRF license issuing manual. The pair were also given a 2-year probation order. The city of Dryden has been facing financial issues for several years, but 2018 is looking bright for the community despite a substantial debt repayment. In total, $3.8 million, the largest amount in the city's history, will be paid out. However, the city managed to pass its 2018 budget with a 0% tax increase, and according to CAO Ernie Remillard, council was able to put money into the city's reserve funds for the first time in years, bringing it to a total of $3.5 million.
We're in great shape right now. So in saying that, even though that debt payment is high, what that tells me is we're actually in really good shape for the future, because if we can afford to make debt payments like that and still have council approve $1 million in capital projects, leveraging that with the province to well over $4 million in projects, that's really exciting.
Debt repayment amounts are slated to go down gradually over the next 3 years before dropping to under $1 million per year after 2021. Remillard says the budget also included infrastructure increases to road and sidewalk maintenance in the city. Sticking with provincial politics, New Democrats in the Thunder Bay Atikokan riding are looking for a new candidate. This following news that John Rafferty is stepping away from his bid to win the seat in the next provincial election. In a news release issued Friday morning, Rafferty disclosed he had recently begun treatment for a serious medical condition and is unable to continue as a candidate. He had been given the party's nod to run in the election at a nomination meeting last June. Rafferty previously served as Member of Parliament for the federal riding of Thunder Bay Rainy River from 2008 to 2015. In his news release, Rafferty indicated the NDP will now begin searching for a new candidate, with details to be released at a later date. Well, a prominent First Nations leader in the Northwest is facing criminal charges. Grassy Narrows Chief Simon Fobister was arrested twice this month by Treaty 3 police. 62-year-old Fobister had been a leader for the embattled reserve north of Kenora for several decades, and he spent much of that time challenging the government to clean up the mercury contamination in the Wabigoon River. According to court documents, Fobister was charged with impaired driving on January 5th. He was also charged again this past Sunday, this time with domestic assault and breach of a court order. Treaty 3 police would not provide any details about the two incidents. It's unclear at this time whether the charges will affect Fobister's position as Chief of Grassy Narrows. His next court date is scheduled for February 22nd. For 12 years, Red Rock's Norampak Mill has been shuttered and has slowly been deteriorating. In 2014, the property was purchased, and many in the community believed in the possibility of a return to prosperity. However, after an industrial accident late last year, the site has been silenced once again, leaving many residents with feelings of doubt. Ryan Bonazzo has more.
It's been just over 2 months since a collapse during demolition operations at the former Norampak Mill in Red Rock sent one worker to hospital with minor injuries. The Ministry of Labor was called in to investigate and shut the site down. According to Mayor Gary Nelson, the site has been relatively inactive since then. He says shortly before the holidays, some new equipment was dropped off at the site.
We thought they would start working on it again right away, but they may be waiting until spring, till the snow goes. I think they pulled the machine out that was damaged. But you know, we in the fall, when they told us they were going to explode all the buildings down there, bring bulldozers in, clean it up, we thought that was the answer.
Nelson says he and many others in town have been left almost in the dark on any details in relation to the site, and very little conversations have been held with the owner, Justice Veldman, who purchased the property from the town for just $10 with the promise of cleaning the site up and bringing new business to the community.
Have you ever reached out to say what's the timeline for this demolition project at all?
No, not really, not for a while. We did in the past, and not hearing anything from Mr. Veldman. He keeps telling me his phone number is there, give him a call. I've tried to call him, I don't get no answer.
Nelson hopes something can be made of the property to provide relief to residential taxpayers in the community and help the town pay for repairs or a replacement for its aging sewage treatment plant.
When that mill went down, I think it was in the area of $1.5 million a year in taxes. That we don't get that anymore. So taxes in town did go up for 4 years in a row. We're trying to keep the taxes down. So we have to rely on the government to help us out a little bit with our infrastructure.
But until the demolition teams return, the site and the economic potential it holds will remain silent. Shane Pasquino, TBT News.
Patty Haidu was making her rounds along the North Shore this week, sitting down and speaking with municipal councils and organizations in several communities. On Wednesday evening, she met with some residents from Terrace Bay at a town hall-style event and listened to their thoughts and concerns about life in the region. Adam Riley was there and files this report.
I hate as a teacher to reward that behavior, but
Unlike the town halls being hosted by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, things are a little tamer in Terrace Bay, as Patty Haidu sat down with residents to get insight from her constituents. She says despite being a minister, she's still the MP for Thunder Bay Superior North and wants to hear from those living in the area.
And I can't do a good job of that if I'm not out in the communities talking to people about what their issues are, what their concerns are, what they're happy about, what they're not so happy about. And that's what makes me a better representative for the region.
So I just have general questions. I don't know much about the process going into the fire about that. I know that the mill did have a meeting last year about the air quality, so citizens were concerned about it.
It was a small crowd for the 2-hour event, but not a quiet one, as residents spoke with their federal representative.
Topics of discussion range from truth and reconciliation to the environment to even childcare, items normally not seen within Haidu's ministerial portfolio. But she says it's all part of being an MP. Sometimes she has to act as a conduit, networking constituents to those who are able to help at both the federal and provincial levels of government.
People are concerned about the quality of life in terms of the environment. You know, this is an area that is really interconnected to the great outdoors and to nature, and so some concerns about the quality of the environment in terms of the mill that is in operation here. So we hear concerns that are things that I can do things about, things that I would have to work with my provincial counterpart with, and that's exactly what I expect when I come to them.
Haidu also spoke about her riding and the Kenora riding being in the top 5 constituencies in the country as far as the total amount of federal funding announcements received since the Liberals rose to power just over 2 years ago.
We have had an infrastructure deficit both in Thunder Bay but also all throughout the region. Communities have struggled with some of the most basic things like clean water, access to housing, affordable housing, roads, a variety of different kinds of projects, energy, broadband. These are the kinds of things that people have been working on for a long time. So it's always very fulfilling for me when I can support a community in their endeavors.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
Coming up after the break, as students at Lakehead University ramp up the pressure to have embattled Senator Lynn Bayak resign from the Red Chamber. Stay with us. Well, students at Lakehead University are calling for Senator Lynn Bayak to resign. The student union and the school's Native Student Association held a day of action on Wednesday regarding the senator and her controversial opinions about Canada's Indigenous population. Corey Nordstrom has the story.
A day of action was held at the LU Agora Center to pay respect to those affected by the residential schools and denounce Senator Lynn Bayak's comments towards them. In March of 2017, Bayak said there wasn't enough recognition of the good deeds done at the residential schools. This event at Lakehead was dubbed Let's Sack Bayak, in support of the movement to have her removed from the Senate. Vice President of Advocacy with the Lakehead Student Union, Lindsay Kelly, says this is a way of sticking up for those affected by Bayak's words.
These students are in our community, these students are in our classrooms, and these students are directly affected by this lateral violence. A lot of them are either direct survivors of the schools themselves, or they have family members that were affected by them. And the fact that, statistically speaking, somebody can say that there was a benefit to them is absolutely appalling.
A petition calling for Bayak's resignation was at the forefront of the day's activities. with many students signing the document in protest of her words on residential schools.
It's kind of insane to me that some people are still denying what happened there, and I don't think a government official should be doing that, of all people, so I thought it would be important to get this issue more out in the open and for people to really understand what's happening there.
Anishinaabe ASCII Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler spoke at the rally to commend the Lakehead students on their activism on this matter.
I think it's the young people in this country that will begin to create a better future for all of us. So it's really great to see the young people of Thunder Bay and the students here stepping up to taking this action.
Signatures from the event will be added to the over 4,400 online signatures, as well as any others collected in person. On February 24th, the petition will be sent to Bayak herself. The First Nations group that started the petition hope to have 10,000 signatures by that date. Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
Meanwhile, one of Lynn Bayak's colleagues in the Canadian Senate is echoing the call for her resignation. Bayak has been under fire since last year for her controversial remarks about Indigenous people in Canada. Thousands of people, including students at Lakehead University, have signed this petition calling for the senator from Dryden to resign. Another senator, independent member Kim Pate, was in Thunder Bay this past week visiting Dennis Franklin Cromartie High School. She was asked about Bayak's remarks and what should have been done to solve the problems.
And take responsibility for the mistakes that she's made. There may be, but I think it's time for her to go, and anybody who feels those ways really is not representing the most vulnerable in our country and not representing the most marginalized, and that's part of our job. And so I do think that if she's not able to get there, then there's a responsibility to not be using taxpayers' money to further her own personal interests.
Bayak was kicked out of the Conservative caucus earlier this month after refusing to remove comments from her Facebook page, which many considered to be racist. And as we just mentioned, member of the Canadian Senate Kim Pate paid a visit to Dennis Franklin Cromartie High School this past week. The independent senator was talking to students and staff about how she can support them on a number of different issues. Shane Pasquino was there.
Senator Kim Pate answered questions as students and staff at Dennis Franklin Cromartie High School looked on, wondering if she could help them and how soon that help could potentially come. The words from the senator's mouth could have not came across more clear as she said, "I have a responsibility to you. I am your senator." One of those responsibilities is investing in Indigenous youth, something she says needs to become a top priority.
It is time to invest in our young people, and there's all kinds of things happening here, from the outdoor programs that, those kinds of resources are really well spent when we know that the more you invest early in whether it's childcare, child welfare, health care, and education, you either pay now or you pay way more later.
One of the many things DFC has been pushing for is a residence that can be built nearby. As of right now, most students live in boarding houses across the city. Some say their commute is over 2 hours a day just to come to school.
I think transportation just goes long ways, but if we have a residence, I think it would be much better as everyone lives together.
If this school had a residence, if there were more opportunities for people to come and do distance education as well, I can see all kinds of tremendous potential, and in terms of not just what the school is already doing, which is amazing, but also much more that they could be contributing to Indigenous leadership.
Unlike other schools in the city, DFC relies on federal grants and is not funded by the province. Despite having a new music room and tech department, the staff are concerned the building itself is getting in the way of learning.
They're kind of Band-Aid solutions because this is such an old building. I think it was built in the 50s, and there's a lot of stuff we need, like a new roof. There's asbestos in the ceilings, the ceiling tiles, and stuff like that. So the ongoing costs of trying to keep this building alive are very expensive.
Many issues were brought up by both students and faculty here at DFC, with the main one being that the school is vastly underfunded. That's something Senator Pate says she will be talking to with members of Parliament when she returns to Ottawa.
The fact that we are increasingly relying on corporations and private donors to fund education in this country is a travesty. We should be investing in our young people. They are our future. They'll be our future leaders. They are leaders, many of them already.
Shane Pasquino, TBT News.
And we're going to take another short break, but coming up next, a familiar face in education along the North Shore says it's time to retire. There's going to be a change in leadership for the Superior Greenstone District School Board in 2018. Director of Education David Tamblin is set to retire before the summer holidays. Adam Riley had a chance to sit down with Tamblin as he reflected on his career.
He spent 30 years with the Superior Greenstone District School Board, and now Director of Education David Tamblin is calling it a career. Starting in 1988 as a teacher and scriber, Tamblin made his way up the ranks, attaining the role of director in 2011. He says the biggest change for him over the years has been how the delivery of education has evolved, especially from a technological standpoint.
When I first came in, I think there were Commodore 64s were in use, and we were all getting used to using those in the classroom. And through the evolution of technology, I mean, we introduced computers and laptops. E-learning is another program that's really come along in the last 25 years or so.
During his tenure, Tamblin has had to deal with the closure of some schools within the district due to low enrollment. There have also been issues with attendance, which he and the other directors of education in the Northwest combated through the I'm Here campaign last year in hopes of curbing the problem. But he says he is proud of the many partnerships the board has entered into in his time.
We have a very good partnership with Conn College in terms of the secondary high school major program, where students are learning, they're picking up tickets. We are working with Lakehead University currently in developing the achievement program to benefit our First Nations students to get them to go on to post-secondary education.
Tamblin says despite the advancements, there are still some things he wishes he could have accomplished as director, specifically on the subject of First Nations students from the region. Instead of traveling to Thunder Bay, he'd like to see them attending high schools in Superior Greenstone, where the student populations are as low as 75 students in some cases. He says they are already seeing success with students from Martin Falls attending school in Geraldton, and he wishes to expand that effort.
I think there's an opportunity there for students from the Northern Reserves to come live in a small community and not have as big of a cultural shock as they would coming to a larger urban center like Thunder Bay.
Tamblin says his successor, who has not been selected at this time, will have to pursue that endeavor. Tamlin's retirement will take effect at the end of this school year. Adam Riley, TBT News.
And Employment Minister Patty Hajdu is defending the Trudeau government's new summer job funding requirements. A church leader in Oliver Papoonge says he doesn't think they'll be eligible for their annual youth employment grant due to the church's anti-abortion beliefs. For the past 2 summers, the First Christian Reformed Church has received federal money to hire 3 university students to manage summer camps for kids. This year, the application has changed. Applicants now have to attest that they will respect reproductive rights as part of the core mandate for the funding. Church Council member Chris Grutenbauer claims the government is forcing them to be pro-choice. But Hajdu says religious groups can still have their own core beliefs. They just can't use the money for core activities, which undermine people's rights.
The primary purpose of creating jobs for kids is not going to go to organizations that actively work to undermine those rights, like the Center for Bioethical Reform that received, in 2016, something like $50,000 and produced, pamphlets of graphic aborted fetuses and had summer students working in that, on those projects, distributing that material, like, summer camps are organizations that discriminate against young kids from the GLBTQ community.
Hajdu says that she knows this may go to the courts, but the government is standing by this approach and look forward to defending their approach. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Northwest Newsweek. Thank you all for being with us, and be sure to join us next time.